For decades, the United States has entered major conflicts, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now, indirectly, Ukraine, only to see outcomes that contradict the goals Washington originally announced. In Vietnam, the enemy was the Communist Party of North Vietnam. Today, that same party governs the unified nation. In Afghanistan, the United States spent 20 years fighting the Taliban. Today, the Taliban rules Afghanistan. Iraq became a long, costly conflict that left deep instability rather than the promised transformation. And Ukraine? Much of the world outside the Western media sphere already views the conflict as effectively decided. Russia holds the advantage, and Western expectations of a strategic victory have not materialized. This pattern signals a deeper issue, a recurring mismatch between objectives, capabilities, and outcomes. During the same period, the geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically. For roughly 75 years after World War II, the United States and its G7 allies dominated the global economy. But economic leadership is not permanent. While the West relied on old structures of power, new coalitions quietly grew. China and the BRICS nations Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa expanded their output year after year. By 2020, the combined GDP of China and its BRICS partners roughly matched that of the United States and the G7. Since then, BRICS growth has consistently outpaced the West, widening the gap. Today, the U.S. G7 share of global output sits around 28%, while BRICS stands near 35%. The momentum has shifted, and every major corporation, every government, and every global financial strategist understands this, even if political messaging at home has not caught up. This marks the first time in living memory that the United States faces a serious economic competitor. After World War II, other advanced societies were devastated while the U.S. surged ahead. But China's rise, rapid, disciplined, and sustained, has created a peer rival the U.S. cannot ignore. China grows at roughly twice the American rate year after year. That is structural, not temporary. This dynamic also shaped the war in Ukraine. When Western governments attempted to cut Russia off from energy markets, Moscow simply rerouted exports to China and India. The sanctions the U.S. expected to be decisive proved limited in a world where half the global population continues trading freely. Attempts at economic isolation no longer function in a multipolar environment. The world has changed, and denial doesn't reverse that. At home, the rhetoric of ending endless wars has repeatedly collided with actions that escalate tensions. Threats against multiple nations, Mexico, Canada, Nigeria, Venezuela, and more, signal uncertainty rather than coherent strategy. When leaders lean toward military solutions to domestic political challenges, observers abroad interpret it not as strength, but as instability. Tariffs, too, were promoted as a tool to revive American industry. But tariffs are simply taxes on imported goods, and businesses pass those costs directly to consumers. This fuels inflation and forces Americans to pay more for lower-quality alternatives. The world, meanwhile, buys more competitive products, like China's electric vehicles, at far lower prices. The U.S. shields itself from foreign competition, but in doing so isolates itself from global innovation. The result is painful irony. The very measures designed to protect American competitiveness end up weakening it. Companies are not returning in large numbers, and tariff manipulation has even opened the door to foreign influence. Incidents that would be labeled bribery elsewhere barely make headlines in the U.S., another sign of how normalized dysfunction has become. This pattern is familiar from history. Empires in decline often respond by overextending militarily, hoping to reclaim through conflict what they have lost economically or politically. Rome experienced this as new powers pressed in and old assumptions crumbled. The U.S. may be facing a similar moment, one where old strategies no longer work, yet leaders continue to rely on them. Today, Washington has defined China as its primary adversary, while remaining locked in the Ukraine conflict despite escalating costs and diminishing strategic purpose. Meanwhile, BRICS nations represent over half the world's population. The U.S. is home to about 4.5%. The G7 combined represents under 20%. Demographics, economics, and alliances all point toward a world where American dominance is no longer guaranteed. The United States now faces a choice: continue along the current path, one that risks economic strain, international isolation, and possible conflict with powers it cannot realistically overwhelm, or rethink its role within a world that is no longer unipolar.